Welcome to episode 57 of Ping, a Firewalls.com podcast, a bi-weekly look at cybersecurity, including interviews, news, expert tips, and the latest trends. I'm Kevin Baxter, and I'm joined by my Firewalls.com colleague, Andrew Harmon.
Hey there.
Hey, Andrew. As we tackle a different featured topic on each episode. New ones are normally out every other Wednesday, so subscribe or follow on your favorite podcasting platform to get the latest first. And please do rate and review us, and drop us a line anytime via email at podcast@firewalls.com. As always, thanks for listening, and now it's time to introduce our featured topic and our guest for this episode.
With the threat landscape seemingly more active than ever this year, the month of October takes on added significance. The 2021 edition of the National Cybersecurity Awareness Month is themed #becybersmart, and that's clearly important for both individuals and organizations in combating cyber attacks.
To discuss this year's theme, its importance, the month's origins, and more, we welcome National Cybersecurity Alliance Interim Executive Director, Lisa Plagemeyer. Lisa, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And so we've talked about Cybersecurity Awareness Month in the past, but tell us a little bit about its origins, first of all, and I guess it's reached voting age this year, too.
Yeah, it's been around for about 18 years. It was started by the National Cybersecurity Alliance and the Department of Homeland Security. And so we're a nonprofit that advocates for the safe and secure use of all technology. And we're here to empower a more secure, interconnected world. So we've got tons of content on our website to help people from all walks of life use technology securely. So whether you're a parent with kids and you're looking for some tips on how to make sure your kids are using technology safely, or you've got aging parents, or you're trying to make a career decision, maybe you're interested in cybersecurity as a career. We have all sorts of tip sheets and libraries and lots of different information on our website, staysafeonline.org.
And it's been very impressive to see the growth of awareness for this month overall. 18 years ago, I imagine back then it was a little bit more small and obscure, but now we've got people from the White House and everybody involved. Has this all been just a grassroots effort, basically, of growing the popularity of this month?
Yeah, pretty much. We are seeing huge increases year after year. And frankly, the problem is getting worse. The problem is growing. So I think that's also sort of driving demand, if you will, for plain spoken information. So often in the media, these issues are sensationalized. You know, we saw people in the Northeast waiting in line for gas when the pipeline attack happened. And we hear about ransomware attacks, maybe on our local school district or a doctor's office or a hospital. And it's just gotten really egregious. It's affecting people's daily lives. Cybercrime has risen exponentially. Things like phishing have risen exponentially, especially since COVID, because cybercriminals are using our emotional levers to try and trick us. So we saw a big increase in phishing emails with themes like where to buy PPE and COVID-related information, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, coupons for toilet paper, like any topic you can think of related to COVID, where people were feeling emotionally stressed and strained. You know, early on, there were phishing emails with themes about where to get the vaccine or vaccine development, things like that. So the bad guys have just gotten really, really good at using topics from our daily lives and knowing that we're a little bit stressed, especially right now with the pandemic. Hopefully things have gotten better in the last few months as more people are vaccinated, but they know that we're emotional beings, right? We're human beings and we make sometimes decisions based on how we feel about something. And they know that. And so they use those things to try and trick us. So as those attacks have gotten more frequent, and we've seen things like ransomware affect people's daily lives, that has driven more people to just look for plain spoken information that explains these things in layman's terms, that's not sensationalized, that gives you the simple tips that you can use to stay secure. It's a lot easier than people think. There are a few key behaviors. If we change those things, it would make an enormous dent in global cybercrime.
And so as the years have gone by, I mean, you mentioned, obviously, I think people have to be sort of living under a rock at this point to not note that there are cybersecurity dangers out there. But are you noticing in, folks that you talk to, organizations that you work with now this year in particular, and in recent years, just a better general starting point of awareness?
Yeah, I think so. A lot of organizations now have dedicated resources to run what's called a security or privacy training and awareness program. So that'll be an individual that is usually part of the security team maybe works together with the learning and development team in the organization and corporate communications and HR. And they do things like send simulated phishing emails to the employees to help train employees to recognize a phish and to know how to report one to the security team. So the security team can make sure that nobody falls prey to that. And then they assign people training. And these days that's gotten to be really interesting. Instead of the sort of boring compliance training that a lot of us have had to take in the past, whether it's about, regulations like HIPAA or it's about cybersecurity or privacy regulations, a couple of years ago, that stuff was pretty boring and you did it once a year and you just wanted to get it over with. Well, these days people are using gamified training. They're using live action dramatic series, live action comedic series, really trying to affect the culture of their organization and just encourage employees to be a little bit more cyber aware. And so those solutions have gotten so much better. And, it's really not a job that a security engineer should be doing. You really want folks that have maybe a training background or a marketing or communications background to explain these things to employees, to sort of play that role of translator between the IT department and the rest of the employees.
Right. So this year's theme, and you guys have a different theme each year, is play your part, #BeSmart. And so on the individual level, as well as organizational level, a lot of the focus is going to be on securing your own piece of cyberspace. What does that mean for the average endpoint user out there?
Well, one correction, the hashtag is actually becybersmart, and that theme is not going to change. So that's going to be evergreen year after year because we're trying to drive awareness. And as an ex-marketing person, I can tell you my favorite line is, if McDonald's changed their logo and tagline every year, you probably wouldn't know who McDonald's was. So we're going to keep that consistent because we're trying to build awareness with the general public. Yeah, there's a couple key behaviors. We actually did some research lately that's available on our website into just 6 core behaviors. So that's how you create and manage your passwords, whether or not you use multi-factor authentication, whether or not you install software updates. Those are more often than not security related. Those little pop-ups that you get on your machine asking you to update, checking for phishing, reporting phishing, and what are your practices on backing up your data, which is a great way to combat the effects of ransomware. So it's really those core things. And if the vast majority of people just changed a few little things, like they didn't use the same password on multiple accounts, maybe used a password manager to manage all those, or made sure that they were using multi-factor authentication on every account where it's available. Those 2 simple things right there would make a massive difference. There's a major technology company, I don't remember which one, but they said in a press release in the last couple of months that since they enabled multi-factor authentication for all of their customers, in other words, their customers didn't have a choice. They have to give not just their password, but a PIN number or some sort of push to another device like their phone. They haven't had a single credential-based breach since. So that's really, really powerful. That tells you just how effective that technology is. And it's a little bit of an annoyance, if you set up multi-factor authentication and you're logging onto an account, maybe in your home office, and then you realize you left your phone in your car and you have to go out to your garage and get your car to get the PIN number. Sometimes we can find these things frustrating. There's a little bit of user friction, but it's really worth it in the end if you can get over that initial hump of doing it. In fact, of the people who use multi-factor authentication, of people who've used it at least once, our research shows that the vast majority of them will keep using it. 90% of them report that they continue to use it. So it's just establishing a new habit, which is hard, but a couple of these really simple things can go a long way.
Often it's the idea of the inconvenience that bugs people more than the actual act. Like sort of they have an idea that, this is going to be, I don't want to have to change my password on a regular basis, or, I don't want to have to pick up my phone every time I log in. But it does seem as if once people start to undertake the behaviors and sometimes they need that nudge of being maybe pushed to or forced to, it does seem to help.
Yeah. And I think we're a little bit to blame in the security space for using scary stories to try and influence people, using pictures of hackers in hoodies and using language like threats and attacks and defenses. And it's so militaristic, and your average person just doesn't want to engage with that. That just exacerbates that feeling of frustration. And when I hear language like that, if you tell me something's a threat and I'm not a trained law enforcement person, I'm just going to run away, right? It exhibits that fight or flight. And so I think we need to be talking more about the positive that can come from this and the peace of mind you feel when you do some of these things. You don't worry as much. You see the sensational headlines, but you have some secure habits so you're less likely to be affected. I think we need to sell positivity and peace of mind more than the scary stories and the threats that something, somebody in a far off country, it's very intangible. It's not immediate and it's not tangible. It's not like a bad guy standing at your front door. And so it's harder for people to imagine that they actually are at risk because the threat is far off and intangible, but it's real nonetheless.
Yeah, we talked recently about burnout in the cybersecurity job space as far as the sort of always on adversary. And we didn't discuss much what that could mean for individual employees that are being told that, at any time they could be a victim of this invisible threat. So it's interesting to discuss.
Yeah, it is a real problem with cybersecurity professionals. They can get burned out very quickly. It's definitely a 24/7 job, that's for sure. And I would say, like any other employees that are feeling stressed, they really need the support of their leadership, that the work that they do is appreciated. And I think cybersecurity professionals, if you take a risk-based approach, if you really focus on the big rocks first, not the grains of sand, and you have cooperation from your business on what your security program should look like, then that can help to mitigate a lot of the stress. But a lot of us seeing a lot of bad things happen all day, all those grains of sand can feel overwhelming. So my advice to stressed out security folks would be to really focus on the big rocks and work together with your business as much as you can.
I think that's a good segue into the month is broken up into weeks where you're highlighting certain items in the cybersecurity space too. And one of the weeks talks about cybersecurity career awareness. And in talking about the burnout issue, there's also the issue of just not enough people getting into this field. So what is that theme really trying to focus on?
Well, there are actually millions of unfilled jobs in cybersecurity. If you have any interest in it whatsoever, I would highly encourage you to take a look at the career field. And it's not all STEM. You don't have to love math or love computer science. You don't have to be a programmer. There's a whole bunch of different roles that make up your average security team. There's people that are more business focused that might work in policy and risk. Of course, there's the 24/7 eyes on glass kind of guys, security engineers, threat hunters. A lot of these jobs are really exciting and really rewarding because you have a huge sense of mission. You're working against global cybercrime. We have some new content on our website. We looked around as a nonprofit and said, how do we help do something about this problem? All these unfilled jobs and not enough people studying cybersecurity, not enough young kids looking at it as a career field. And we noticed that there's a ton of resources out there, free information, free instructional materials, free lesson plans for teachers. There's even a Girl Scout badge program on cybersecurity that was started by Palo Alto Networks. But we realized all these resources are kind of scattered around the internet and they can be difficult to find if they, don't have a lot of search engine optimization running behind them. So we created a new library, a career and education resource library on our website, staysafeonline.org. And there you can find just this enormous library with links to all these different resources that exist on government websites, because the federal government has a lot of programs. There are programs out there for women and minorities and every different group you can think of, and just tons of information, mentoring networks if you're thinking about a career in this space. So I would encourage you, if you're thinking about it, if your children are thinking about it, to visit staysafeonline.org and take a look at our career and education resource page.
And speaking of the website, as you said, it's a great place for finding all of these different resources sort of in one place. And you can also sign up to be a cybersecurity champion. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, I love it when people sign up to be champions of Cybersecurity Awareness Month. If you signed up in the past, you need to sign up again every year. It gives you access to a whole bunch of extra materials. We already have hundreds of free resources. So if you're looking for tip sheets, maybe you work in an organization or a company and you're looking to share information with your coworkers, or you're looking for information to help you talk to your parents about cybersecurity if you have aging parents. If you're looking for tips, as I said, on how to make sure your kids are using security technology securely and safely. There's a lot of dangers out there and things that can affect children, of course. We have content for every different demographic. And so if you sign up to be a champion, you get access to even more resources, and your name gets listed on our website, which gets about 2 million views a year. And that number of champions is reported to the Department of Homeland Security every year. And we're just watching that steadily increase year after year.
And so as we get near the tail end of the month and wrapping this up, is there one particular issue? I know you mentioned the 6 things that people can do, but is there one particular one that either you're seeing individuals or businesses really lacking at the moment in terms of their security exposure?
Well, of that list, I have 2 favorites. One of them is having long, complex passwords or passphrases and not reusing them, not using them on multiple accounts. I think a lot of us are guilty of that. As over the years, as password rules have gotten more complex, in other words, you go to set up an account online somewhere, and there's that long list of things, criteria that your password needs to meet. And most of us just kind of sigh and roll our eyes and think, okay, now I got to think of something that meets all these criteria, uses all kinds of special characters and numbers and letters and lowercase, uppercase. And oh yeah, it's got to be something I can remember. So what happens is we finally think of something that meets all the rules and that we won't forget. And we kind of fall in love with that password, and then we use it on multiple accounts. And the bad guys know this. And so they take credentials that were stolen in a breach and use them using automation. They try to break into other accounts where we might use that same password. So passwords are a biggie. There will come a day when we're passwordless. We're seeing some companies move that direction, but it's going to be a little while yet. And so I recommend using a password vault or password manager. And then my second favorite on the list is 2-factor or multi-factor authentication. And that's just where you have to prove that you're you in 2 different ways. So maybe you have a password, and then, like we said, that PIN number that gets sent to your phone, or something biometric like your fingerprint or an iris scan. And that just means that if somebody does have your credentials to your account and they're trying to break in, that they can't get in if they don't also have that second factor of authentication. So that one is huge. Those 2 alone, those are if I had to pick favorites on the list, those would be my favorites.
So that's kind of 2-pronged, both as an individual, take responsibility on your passwords, and as an organization, make those requirements stiffer and maybe require MFA, as you said, the other company did.
Yeah, I would actually say that if you're a consumer and you're using a bank that doesn't have multi-factor authentication, that you should consider getting a new bank. It's really that critical.
So we talked about the website a bit. Tell us where people can find it and get more info on National Cybersecurity Awareness Month.
We have a really simple URL, staysafeonline.org, and everything that you need, you'll see when you get there, signing up to become a champion. We have events, we have webinars, we have some in-person events as the world wakes up again from COVID. Lots of different ways to get involved, whether you're just an average citizen or you're a member of an organization. We have a board made up of some great companies that support us, and lots of different ways to get involved. You can follow us on all the major social media channels as well.
Great, Lisa. Thanks very much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
Now it's time for headlines. In this regular segment, we take a closer look at some top stories in the cybersecurity world and discuss what they may mean to you. Now, headline number 1, and this is a mouthful of a headline, by the way. Deloitte surveys businesses have a false sense of cybersecurity caused by positive self-evaluation of their capabilities and the lack of basic defense efforts. So this is a survey or surveys by Deloitte Cyber Surveys for the financial and consumer sectors in the European Union. And what did they find?
They discovered the Dunning-Kruger effect, I believe. So basically, these companies believe more than 70% of respondents this is self-evaluated, by the way, ranked themselves as far as their cybersecurity awareness and preparedness is concerned as a 7 or higher on the standard 0 to 10 scale, which apparently they also do in the European Union. No metric version to worry about. And only 9% of companies in the financial sector specifically said that they had implemented all 4 of the baseline cybersecurity message that Deloitte sort of outlined as their minimum threshold to pass with a passing grade.
Those seem to be conflicting numbers then, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, so they are very confident in their abilities, but their abilities might not be so competent.
Yeah. Also, in the consumer businesses space, only 4 out of the 10 surveyed said that they have a cyber defense strategy with basic defense efforts being implemented in full or in part. So, yeah, there's the awareness part, apparently, as we talk about Cybersecurity Awareness Month. The awareness part is maybe not too bad, except that they might not be aware of exactly what cybersecurity means.
Right. So again, over 70% of respondents in the financial, consumer, energy, resources, industrials, basically all sectors surveyed here, over 70% did recognize that cyber threats over the last 2 years have increased in, I guess, both potency and frequency.
Yeah, that's a solid number there. They also have a higher proportion of respondents in both the consumer and the energy resources and industrials, and as well as the financial sector. So that's more than both. They all indicate that the threat level has remained unchanged at a higher percentage than other sectors as well. So about a quarter or so of all 3 of these sectors saying that, it's just as bad now as it was 2 years ago. And that's sort of being attributed in this piece to the fact that maybe these industries have been a little more aware of the threats out there for a little bit longer.
Yeah, so maybe they were more in the loop before, so sort of the landscape's not exactly shocking to them now. But at the same time, I think there has been a pretty marked increase in cyber threats the last couple of years, whatever your perspective is. So, or maybe that's just the frequency of how often they're making headlines these days.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the threats are getting greater and greater and more widespread. And of course, in addition to that, there's more coverage of them because they're hitting bigger targets more frequently. So yeah, I don't really get how you could say that it hasn't gotten any worse in the last 2 years.
Right. So to paint a picture here, we have all these survey respondents kind of standing on the railroad tracks. 70% or more of them see the train coming, and they're giving a big old thumbs up to the safety guy who's just kind of shaking his head as he watches the train get closer. As far as individual threats that these guys are worried about, at least in the financial sector, the biggest one is phishing. Over half of respondents put phishing and malware through email as their biggest concern, followed by technical vulnerabilities in their infrastructure, and then finally data leakage.
And it's always interesting when you see these kinds of responses because, all of these are related. I mean, data leakage and data loss can occur because there's an issue that comes into your network by phishing and malware being delivered through a phishing email, that kind of thing. And that may only work because there's a vulnerability unpatched in one of your applications. So I always find that interesting when you see these sort of separated into different categories, because most of the time they're all sort of intertwined.
Right. And so, definitely seeing all these threats out there, and I think they make sense as far as the rank they're being given here. Definitely makes sense to have phishing and malware at that top spot. But the survey, or I guess this particular story about the survey, does go on to give some further suggestions about how this can all be improved and shaped up.
Yeah. And really, the main suggestion is getting more complex in terms of organizations handling their cybersecurity testing and things like that. So not just pen testing or vulnerability scanning, but going into a very extensive framework is suggested here by Andrei Ionescu from Deloitte, Romania. He actually introduces us to a new acronym that I had never heard before, the Threat Intelligence-Based Ethical Red Teaming European Union Framework, published by the European Central Bank, and that is abbreviated Tiber-EU or TIBER-EU. I'm not sure because you wouldn't say EU as you, but I think you should say Tiber there. So anyway, that's a very kind of extensive framework involving aspects of the pen testing and vulnerability scanning, but much more too.
Yeah, so the idea being to sort of organize your testing in a similar fashion to how a real attack would take place. And I think that makes sense for the real world application they're trying to get here.
Yeah. And, another one that was mentioned in here was supply chain as a concern for especially the energy resources and industrials businesses and in the consumer sector as well. That's that's a big one for this past year. Also, as we talk about SolarWinds and all of those other types of attacks that have sort of come in through a side door, as it were. The other kind of key piece mentioned in this story is that the financial sector's management teams have shown a little bit more of a focus on cybersecurity topics than those in other sectors. So 42% of the respondents indicate cybersecurity is on the leadership agenda monthly or more frequently, compared to 37% in the consumer sector and just 30% in energy, resources, and industrials.
And I think that makes sense. The financial sector is a pretty big target and obviously a lot of motivation if there's that much money churning around in the industry.
Right. And one final point that sort of underlines some of the survey responses, Ionescu, who I just mentioned, said that during the last 2 years, malware and phishing activities reached the top 3 most frequent threats in the European Union as well. So not just perceived, as 71% of the organizations and companies have faced malware activities, and the rate of phishing fraud rose by, and this is a pretty crazy number, 667% in just 1 month during the pandemic.
Welcome to the party.
Now, headline number 2. Hacking tool linked with a Russian crime ring used in Sinclair ransomware attack, analysts say. So this is a CNN story. The hacking tool used in a ransomware attack that disrupted programming at Sinclair Broadcast Group, you may have heard about this one, is similar to malicious code previously used by a Russian crime group sanctioned by the U.S. government, according to a security researcher who has viewed the ransom note. And Andrew, who is this crime group? I think we've mentioned them a few times.
Yeah, if everybody wants to get their cybercrime bingo card out again, stick another spot on for Evil Core. So this is someone we've seen in the news quite a lot over the last year or two. And of course, there has been the always suspected link with the Russian government. Not exactly sure if that comes into play here or if that was solely a money-motivated move behind this Sinclair ransomware attack. But they were using a brand new type of ransomware that Evil Core has not been seeing used a whole lot before.
Yeah, called Macaw ransomware, according to Alan Liska, who is with the Recorded Future. Yeah, it's interesting. We've talked about so many of these ransomware cells that have sort of come and gone over the last year plus, and Evil Corp has stuck around. I guess they've been taking in the funds and not had as many issues with maybe their affiliates as some of the other ones have.
Yeah, they've not been forced to rebrand on all the hacker forums. So
yeah.
Kept their nose clean-ish, I guess.
Yep, no hacker court appearance for them.
So Sinclair, the broadcasting group, just to give a little more context for those unaware, is a TV operator, second largest operator in the U.S. I think most people would recognize them for their smaller local newscasts. So
yeah.
This isn't like NBC or anybody. This is more of the spread across the country, lots of local stations and different affiliates.
Yeah, so you'll have your NBC affiliates owned by Sinclair and ABC, CBS, Fox, all of those. And this did affect your local news. If you happen to be a regular viewer of a Sinclair station, earlier in the week that we record this, about mid-October, there was actually an issue with production of some of their local newscasts throughout the day on a couple of days in a row, according to Sinclair staffers. There were even some reports that, yeah, these stations were having to air just some old taped programming, basically, because this attack did cause that kind of an impact on them.
Yeah. So we're not 100% sure why Evil Core, this sort of large, pretty well-known group, decided to attack Sinclair. Obviously, just the ransom is potentially part of it, but this particular group has been sanctioned by the U.S. government. So technically paying a ransom would be violating international law.
Yeah, and we've never actually seen that in practice, I think, in terms of punishment handed out for paying a ransom to a sanctioned entity. But that would be an interesting test to see what the government would do now that they are aware of the attack and who potentially is behind it, if there would be some additional financial penalty or some other type of penalty for Sinclair if they were to pay this ransom. But why did Evil Corp get sanctioned?
So they were sanctioned by the Treasury Department in 2019 after being accused of basically providing direct assistance to the Russian government's malicious cyber efforts. So ended up on the naughty list, or I guess officially naughty list.
So yeah, Sinclair disclosed the hack to its investors, saying while the company is focused on actively managing the security event, the event has caused and may continue to cause disruption to parts of the company's business, including certain aspects of its provision of local ads by its local broadcast stations on behalf of its customers. And so, yeah, if they can't put local programming on, then they also may not be airing ads, which then seems like they'd be losing money in that regard too, because the companies have paid for ads already. So they would have to, at the very least, make up those ads at a different time, which then takes away the ability to sell those same spots in the future. So it's kind of a financial double whammy there for them.
Right. And they did spell out that they're not quite sure what the financial impact here is going to be. And we probably, just as the public, will never really know what it amounts to.
Right. And there was some sort of a data that's been affected. We don't know if anything has been leaked necessarily. Again, we know that Sinclair has a lot of partnerships too, with these being the owner of these local affiliates. And also what we haven't mentioned yet is that they are the largest owner of regional sports networks in the United States too. So they own, I believe, most, if not all, of the former regional Fox Sports channels, which are now called Bally Sports for the most part, that broadcasts Major League Baseball games from area teams. Like the closest one to where we are would be the Cincinnati Reds, are a Bally Sports affiliate, but a number of different baseball teams and also basketball teams in the NBA as that season tips off too. So there's that aspect of things too. So there's definitely a pretty high profile for Sinclair. And they also had some issues with those affiliates that had nothing to do with ransomware this month.
Yes. So two top sports executives made some waves for Sinclair when they publicly criticized the company's strategy involving those regional sports networks that you mentioned, specifically saying that they're not being handled particularly well by Sinclair.
Yeah, and Sinclair had been talking about launching a streaming service that local residents could buy, which would allow them to watch their team's broadcasts without having to have cable, which has not been available previously. But apparently that strategy was thought out by Sinclair without getting the okay from the leagues of these teams that they represent. So we'll have to stay tuned for that. But all in all, yeah, October has not been the best month for the Sinclair broadcast group. Now, headline number 3. Sticky business. Ransomware hits U.S. candymaker ahead of Halloween. The old saying, won't somebody please think of the children? A major U.S. candy company is struggling to fill orders before Halloween after ransomware hackers encrypted its systems. And that's actually the lead of the NBC News story. But actually, if you read further into it, they're not really saying that they're struggling to fill orders before Halloween. They may be struggling to fill orders that are being placed before Halloween, but the candy is on the shelves.
Right. So you don't have to worry about whether this year is trick or treat or just trick. The treats will be there. And of course, we have a national stockpile of candy corn to last for the next 20 years anyways. So.
Yeah, so this is Ferrara, the Chicago-based manufacturer of candies like Sweet Tarts, Laffy Taffy, Nerds, Red Hots, Lemon Heads, Boston Baked Beans, Atomic Fireballs, Pixie Sticks, and Everlasting Gobstoppers. Or if you want to read a different story, they talk about the fact that they make Brock's Candy Corn now and later, also cookies like Famous Amos and Keebler. So it seems like maybe it's a news outlet or a reporter's preference as to which candies they want to highlight here.
Yeah, strange as I get older and reading this list, I'm like, oh, that's still around. Still make them out now and laters.
Yeah. We're in the later phase of the now and laters.
Right. I'm not even sure what Boston baked beans are, but I'm sure somebody out there likes them.
I know what they look like. I don't believe I've ever had one. They're like little, like red. I think they have like a coating. I don't know if it's like coated peanuts or something, but I've never actually had one. I've seen them in bags before.
We'll stop making fun of their second tier candy and get to the actual attack. So Ferreira first noticed that hackers began encrypting their systems and then sent a demand for payment on October 9th, and they have hired outside third-party experts to help the remediation.
Yeah, and did cause some issues in their manufacturing facilities, according to spokespersons there. But they do say that they're still shipping from all of their distribution centers across the country near to capacity and working to process all orders in queue. So yes, the first thing that you would think of when you're thinking of all these candies, and definitely I know sweet tarts and nerds are still really big in the Halloween candy space. So no worries there, because they've been on shelves with Halloween candy shipped in early August. So they weren't really planning on sending more out at this point. The stockpile is safe for Halloween. It's more
Master strategy of bringing holidays forward several months.
Yeah. Yeah, it's paid off big time, baby.
They don't mention Valentine's Day candy at all here. So
no, that's where we might get hit. So it was interesting, too. You mentioned the October 9th date as to when they noted the attack, but it was first disclosed almost 2 weeks later, between 10 days and 2 weeks later. So interesting. I'm not sure exactly what the reasoning behind that delay was. I don't know if they were trying to tamp it down by themselves and kind of sweep it under the rug or what, but it has come out.
They always do. Yes. So we don't really know a whole lot of the aftermath here as far as if a ransom was paid or if they had backups, anything of that nature. So we'll just kind of have to keep an ear out on this story.
Yeah, there's not as much detail here as the previous story we talked about. We don't know who's behind the attack. They don't know what kind of data loss they suffered, but we do know that their factories were taken offline to some degree at some point during October and caused to halt production, at least temporarily, and maybe some issues with distribution centers too. But yeah, I mean, you kind of had to just include this story because we're only a few days away from Halloween and we got to talk about candy.
Yeah, and of interesting note, this is the first ransom that has been asked to pay in the chocolate gold coins rather than not sure how they will move that many straight into Russia, but maybe they'll figure it out.
Well, at least the temperatures should be okay. I don't think they'd have to deal with any melting situation as long as they use the coins from northern climates. And I don't think Russia gets too hot, especially in the winter. Thanks for listening to this episode of Ping, a Firewalls.com podcast. And thanks very much to Lisa Plagemeyer for joining us. Check out the links in the description for more information about everything we discussed. And remember, it's staysafeonline.org to learn more about Cybersecurity Awareness Month and the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Subscribe or follow now, however you listen, to ensure you get our latest episodes as soon as they're available. And please do rate and review us. Visit Firewalls.com for all your network security needs and give us a follow on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. For Andrew Harmon, I'm Kevin Baxter. We'll be back soon with another episode. But in the meantime, we remind you to get secure, stay secure.